Hi, my name is Aaron, this is my show Reeducation, and today we're going to talk a little bit about on-the-ground organizing. So without any further ado, let's jump into it. Okay, so over the past year or so, I've been trying to get involved in as much on-the-ground organizing as I possibly can. I think that it's a really important thing that you always learn all of the things that you need to do in praxis, and then actually take those things out into the field and do those things so you can find out what works and what doesn't. Praxis being basically practice. What you learn hopefully become things that you do. So that is basically what anarchism, what socialism, what most leftist ideas involve is learning about how to do a thing, basically setting up dual power structures, creating alternative networks, that sort of thing, and then actually going out and doing those things and seeing how they perform in real life. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the things that I've learned, and hopefully you can all write down in the comment section down below about some of the things that you have learned. So I guess let's start talking about it. So the very first thing that I have to stress is basically a callback to an old video that I made not very long ago, actually, called Never Let Liberals Lead. And this is probably one of the most important things that you have to know about on-the-ground organizing. Now, the problem with letting liberals lead is they always fall into a very predictable pattern. The old saying goes, the means you use to obtain your object soon themselves become your object. So, for example, money, which is only a means to existence, has itself become the aim of our lives. If you look at that in the context of liberalism or in a liberal organization, the goal of that liberal organization might be to get Medicare for all, or might be to change policy in some way. But what ends up happening almost inevitably every time is that that liberal organization fights harder to keep itself sustained rather than actually fighting for the goals it wants to reach. And that's also a problem that arises with socialist groups as well. It's kind of a human nature thing. Sorry for the human nature meme there. But it is kind of true that when you create an organization, after a while, the organization kind of just wants to keep itself around, right? Even if it finishes obtaining its goal, it still wants to stay there. So soon, all of a sudden, the goal itself no longer becomes the actual goal, and the actual goal just becomes trying to maintain this organization. Now, that isn't to say that we shouldn't work with liberals. We absolutely should work with liberals. We should even work with conservatives. Anybody who isn't so far off the deep end that they are still rational, reasonable human beings, if you have the ability to work with those people, then I think that you should. Check out my last video talking all about how the working class should try to unite against the ruling class. So we absolutely should work with liberals, but the problem is that we should never let them lead organizations. When liberals lead organizations, they end up leading them towards a goal that is counter to what we actually want. As revolutionists, we want to see something change. We want to see the world be different, better in some way. But that is not what a liberal, or a professional liberal, a liberal in power, actually wants. They want to continue and maintain the status quo. That's their goal. They don't have any idealistic ideas in their head about a better society that could be. They already think society is basically as good as it can be, but they think that they can make a few alterations and changes to make it just slightly more comfortable. And that isn't something that is worth wasting your time over. So when you're getting together with people on the ground and you're organizing, make sure that whatever group you're starting or getting into isn't led by liberals. If that happens, you will not be trying to obtain a revolutionary goal. At the end of the day, you're just going to waste your time helping to build an org that will inevitably work towards fucking you over. If you don't have full democracy from the very start, if you don't have things decentralized, if you don't have the structure already set up so there is no hierarchy with a person at the top, if you don't do those things, the organization will fail, or it'll just turn into another liberal charity, and that's not something that you want. That's not something any of us want. We want to be able to use our activism. We want to be able to use the praxis that we do on the ground to further revolutionary goals, to actually get to and obtain a real solution. And without that, you just can't get there. You can't get there through liberal organizations. Hey, Aaron from the future here. So I just want to point out that there is good reason to get involved in liberal organizations, and you shouldn't steer clear of them entirely. If you want to get involved in them, they are a good place for you to radicalize already somewhat radical liberals. You can bread pill them, so to speak. A lot of these people, if they're already highly motivated enough to get involved in extracurricular groups, then they might be prime candidates to be able to help move a little bit further to the left. But this should not be your primary goal unless your primary praxis is only converting liberals. If that is the case, all the power to you. But for the rest of us, we should primarily focus on revolutionary orgs and only focus on the liberal ones in a secondary way. Now, the second thing that I've learned is that even if you do find an IRL group that isn't ran by liberals, if it's old school communists or Maoists or Marxists or whatever, they might be extremely motivated and extremely ready to do things to get shit done. But there is also the possibility that instead of actually getting shit done, those groups may end up falling into the exact same situation as the liberal group before, where instead of them trying to actually obtain revolutionary goals, their only goal is to continue and maintain the structure that they've already created. And that's just as bad. It doesn't matter if the group is ran by a liberal, by a conservative, by a Democrat, Republican, communist, Marxist, socialist, even anarchist. It doesn't matter. As long as that group isn't motivated and dedicated to the goal and not to maintaining itself, then you're never going to be able to have a group that actually functions towards revolutionary purposes. Now, let's look at the truth here, right? In most places, leftist organizations are very small, nobody knows about them, and even if people do know about them, they really haven't been able to do much over the past 50 years or so. The reasons are clear. Capitalism and the hegemonic powers that be have strangled those groups and made them basically ineffectual. Complacency really starts to set in when the entire world is seemingly against you and you have not been able to actually do something real that significantly helps your society or community in a long time, if ever. And when you do, it's so exhausting that everybody around you just gets completely burned out. These are a lot of the problems that previously established communist, socialist, Marxist, and even anarchist organizations do have. A lot of the time, they evolved and grew up in a time when people really didn't care about socialism at all. Most of these groups are from before even Occupy Wall Street. And they have basically condemned themselves to the belief that the revolution might happen someday, possibly, but it's not something that we should really be fighting towards. We have to be more practical, realistic. We have to focus on other things. And that mentality, unfortunately, doesn't help you further your revolutionary goals, and it doesn't help further the revolutionary goals anywhere. Because the truth is that if we are not creating and spreading and maintaining and establishing real dual power structures, real systems that can actually withstand the collapse of capitalism, socialistic power structures that actually help the people, then there's no way that we'll be prepared for when the capitalist structure actually crumbles and falls apart, which is, I hate to say it, completely inevitable. Every system all across history has been born, evolved, and then died, because that's the way systems go. Marx or Mao would call this the negation of the negation of the negation of the negation of the negation. Every system has inside of it internal contradictions. The internal contradictions within capitalism are mainly the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie. That internal contradiction is going to fight and attack each other until eventually a victor is found. Currently, the victor is the capitalists, if you haven't noticed. But until that dichotomy, until that fight is over, until we completely abolish the system of exploitation that is capitalism, those two forces will always fight each other. We need to negate that and come to a new system, which hopefully should be socialism, but it will not happen without us forcing it to happen. We have to force the material conditions. We actually have to set the material conditions up so that we can have success. I don't care what any revolutionist or any person throughout history has ever said. It is not inevitable to come to socialism. What is inevitable is that every system will be born, evolve, and then die. Socialism isn't an inevitability any more than fascism is an inevitability. Eventually, shit has to break. And either it could go in a socialistic direction, or it could go into a barbaristic direction, which has always been the adage, either socialism or barbarism. And at this point, it's either socialism or extinction. So those two things, which are really kind of just one thing, kind of tucked together, but those two things, they are not exactly the main things, but they're definitely two of the main things that I think of when I first get involved in IRL activism. Next is a pretty obvious one. It's finding ways that you yourself cannot feel completely burnt out. Now, burnout is a real problem, and it's something that happens when people just are trying so hard to get something done, but unfortunately not accomplishing anything. From that, you end up getting burnout. I get burnout on YouTube once in a while, and I have to take a step away from it because it's just too much. The same thing can happen in activism. I know a lot of activists and volunteers and people that get involved heavily into things that have just completely burned themselves, fizzled themselves out within a couple of days, even a couple of weeks. That's because sometimes those sorts of organizations and groups can be stressful, they can be difficult, and if that group isn't focusing on a very specific, very obtainable goal, then everybody's going to start getting burned out really, really fast. Now, the idea of combating burnout is actually relatively simple. If you feel as though you're constantly achieving things, then you're not really going to feel like you're burnt out. In a video game, for example, if you're constantly grinding in this game and never getting anywhere and never actually achieving any sort of success, you're going to probably put the game down and you're not going to care about playing it anymore. But if you're grinding and every few minutes or every so often you get like a small reward, then you're probably going to keep playing because you're getting small rewards the entire time and you're actually achieving things. Those small rewards over time are enough to keep you motivated and energized to get out there and actually do something. And sometimes those small rewards have to come from a place that you never really expected them to come from in the first place. For example, if you're going out and protesting, you probably won't be rewarded at the end of the day with legislation being passed that goes in your favor. You could, but that's not usually the case. Usually, whenever somebody goes out to protest, or whenever a large union or group of people get out in the streets to stop some sort of thing from happening or to fight for their rights, the entire system, the entire structure of capitalism and government falls down upon you and crushes you and makes it so you have the most difficult time ever. This is something that's happened all throughout history. This has been the MO of capitalism and business since the beginning of capitalism and business. As soon as the workers started to figure out that they were being fucked over, they tried to find a way to get out of it and they were crushed. The same thing happened with slaves. The same thing happened with serfs. Fortunately, we were able to abolish slavery and serfdom, mostly, but still we have wage slavery, and that's a much harder thing to abolish. And the entire system that we live under is basically coupled to that idea. So no matter what you do, if you go out into the street and you try to strike and protest, you're going to have a hard time. It is not going to be easy for you. I definitely suggest that you do it because fighting for your freedom is never going to be easy. It's always going to be hard. The fight for freedom requires eternal vigilance. That's a misquote, but it's very true. But at the end of the day, you're probably not going to obtain exactly what you wanted. You're probably not going to get exactly what you want legislatively. So that's going to be a little bit of a deterrent, and it's going to make you feel bad and get you burnt out. But if you make small goals along the way that are achievable, then you're not going to get burnt out as fast. Those small goals could be anything from starting off the campaign by building signs and making that your goal, to getting enough people out to actually march, and then that's your goal, to getting more people out to see if you can get a large group of people out to march, and then that's your goal. Slowly, but slowly, over time, you build things up. Rome wasn't built in the day. Rome wasn't built in the day. Rome was only built at night. No, Rome wasn't built in a day. Having a really hard time with that one. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither can any of your movements. They have to start out small. They inevitably will start out small, and you make small steps to make them better, to make them bigger, to make them grow, to make them actually useful, and to turn them into something that has a fighting chance against the systems that be. So that's number 3. Now, I've been saying a lot of things that you should not do, right? But I haven't really told you a lot of things that you should do. So some of the things that you should do, I'm going to start right at the very base level, and probably a lot of you have heard me say these sorts of things before, but the very base level, how you get an organization started, is just talking to one other person. Preferably somebody that has a like-minded idea as you do, but if not, then that's okay too. As long as they have some sort of anger towards the system, you have a bit of an opening there. You can get in, you can talk to that person, hopefully you can make them see the world as you do, you can give to them a little bit of class consciousness, and then you have basically started the beginning stages of your group. It's gotten you the first step to get on your way. And now that you have that other person, now you go find other people. You find more people to get involved, more people to get invested, and the bigger you are, the more people you get involved, the more people will want to be involved with you, especially if you're doing things that really actually help people. And actually, that's the second point on the things that you should do, is that actually finding ways to help people really gets people motivated to get involved with your group, to get invested in what you're doing, and gets them to go along with the whole idea. If you're out there trying to help somebody, people are going to see that, and they're going to want to get involved. Even people that you wouldn't expect would want to get involved. Businesses and capitalists will even start banging on your door hoping that they can give you a hand. Probably so they can write some charity expenses off on their bills or whatever. But in any case, they're still doing it. And also, your neighbors, your family, your friends, your colleagues, your comrades, people all across your city will see that you're doing things that help people, and they're going to get invested too. All projects start small. They all start small. But that's okay, because you have the ability to make them grow, to make them become something big and powerful. Every oak tree starts as just a seed, but you can water and maintain that tree until it is a towering oak. So the next thing that you should do, which kind of dovetails back into the last thing that I was talking about, is that you should always meet people where they are at, and you should always meet yourself where you are at. You should never try to take on more responsibility or more than you can handle all at once. It's not going to work out well for you, and again, it's going to lead to burnout. And just the same, you can't expect more from other people than they're able to give as well. From each according to their ability, to each according to their need. Every single person is going to have abilities and needs, and we have to all work together to figure out what those are and how we can work towards using them in a way that's beneficial. For example, when I'm helping out with groups and organizations, I can't always do on-the-ground activity. I can't always be right there physically because, reasons. I suffer from chronic pain, whatever. So because of that, I do things that I can do. And that means getting involved with those groups and saying, hey, can I take care of some of your social media? Can I take care of organizing with you in some way? Can I take care of handling disputes or customer service complaints or whatever it is? Those are things that I feel like I'm good at doing because it's not something that's necessarily physical, but it also uses some of the talents that I have, talking to people, coming up with solutions to problems and that sort of thing. That's kind of like my wheelhouse. It's where I'm comfortable. I like doing that sort of thing, and you should find things that you enjoy doing as well, and it's probably going to be something completely different. Maybe you're really good at drawing and you want to do posters. Maybe you're really good at communicating and you want to be an organizer. Or maybe you're a jack of all trades and you can find little places where you can fit in everywhere. All of those things are fantastic, and every single person fits into this mosaic of all of us being able to help one another. So don't ever think that you don't have skills. Don't ever think that you don't have something to contribute, because you absolutely do. You just have to give it a little bit of thought and think about what you can do, and hopefully the organization will help work with you and find that out as well, and find out what they can do for you. That's kind of what this whole thing is about. Working together, mutual aid, and fighting for the fucking revolution. That's what we're here for. But seriously, never ever take on more than you're actually capable of doing, because when you do, you're going to raise your stress level. And if you're starting out an organization or a group or whatever it is, and you're entering into it already at a place where your stress is way higher than it needs to be, then you're inevitably going to put that stress on other people. It's going to bleed out of you. And a lot of the times when you're organizing something, when you're starting a group out, the rot always comes from the top. If you're starting a group out, people are going to look at you as the lead organizer until you democratically made it, not you. So until that point, people are going to look to you for advice. They're going to look to you for guidance. And even after you've elected democratically another person into a position of power, or a council of people into a position of power, or whatever you decide to do, people are always going to look towards the structure, look towards the leadership roles, look towards the people that are there that are highly motivated for their strength, right? So you have to be able to project to other people that you have that strength and that you have that ability to deal with complicated subjects and difficult situations. So if you're entering into this already very stressed out and you can't handle extra stresses on top of that, because starting an organization isn't easy, then you're going to need to take a step back and you're going to need to start a bit smaller. Stress is an unbelievably damaging factor when it comes to organizations, and it can spread very, very quickly. Soon, if the person that is leading the group is stressed out, if they're stressed, then all of a sudden, all of the other volunteers are stressed. Then all of the other volunteers after that become stressed, and people start dropping like flies. You'll lose your organization in a matter of weeks if you don't maintain your ability to handle that stress, to handle the workload that's actually coming down upon you when you're starting an organization. So I kind of jumped ahead of myself on that one because I started talking about how you should start your own organization. Now, the reason why I think that it is very important for you to start your own organization if you're not able to find one that really meshes with your beliefs and values and ideas is that if you start it, then you're the one that is actually able to mold it and cultivate the whole thing into something that can actually be revolutionary and useful. If you are just joining up with another group, it's not going to really be the brainchild of something that you know is the right idea. It's going to be the brainchild of someone else, and you have no idea what their internal motivations are. You have no idea why they want to build that group. If it's solely to help people and to achieve revolutionary goals, or if it's to solely fuel their ego and make them feel superior or powerful in some way. Starting your own groups is a great way to get to know people. It's a great way to get involved in your community. And it's a great way to actually set up the system the way that it needs to be, so you know that it's not going to collapse and crumble into a big hellscape of liberalism and bullshit arguments and drama and all of that crap. You don't want any of that. You want to set it up so that all of the egos are out of the way. You want to set it up in a way that's democratic and absolutely has level hierarchies. At least that's the way I personally would like to set it up. And that's why I set up my own groups. Whenever I've tried to get involved in other groups, I've always been at least a little bit disappointed. Now, that's my experience. Again, I'm coming from a place where there are virtually no leftist groups around me at all. You might be coming from a place where every leftist group that's around you is extremely revolutionary and dedicated to the cause and ready to fight for something real. But that's not everybody. Right? So you have to really take into consideration your material conditions and you have to take into consideration what you can provide and what you can do in that situation. You might be the lone wolf out there, and if you are, all the power to you. If you start your own organization, you're going to have a hell of a time, but once it's started and once it's going, things are going to run a lot more smoothly when you know that they're ran completely horizontally and democratic. Now, I gave you a couple of do's, I gave you a couple of don'ts, and now I'm going to give you a couple of precautionary words. One of the main things that you have to know when you're dealing with groups in general, especially when you're dealing with a bunch of people that are not paid and they're all volunteering, is that tensions can get high and people aren't there because they're being forced to. They're there because they want to be there. They want to help the cause. They want to help you out, or they want to help out the children or the group or the whatever it is. They aren't there to flatter your ego. They aren't there for a paycheck. They're there out of the goodness of their own heart. And you have to take that into consideration. You have to think about that whenever you're organizing these sorts of groups. Obviously, the work of revolution is serious business. It is business, but it can also have a lot to do with emotion as well. You have to treat people with kindness. You have to treat people with compassion and care and love. You have to make sure that the people in your community are there, not just because they feel like they need to be there, but because they want to be there and they want to help make this revolution possible. It's not always going to work out that way. Like I said, there are a lot of different personalities that end up forming within groups, and cliques can start forming and all sorts of drama can happen. But it's up to us to try to maintain those things and to try to stop those things from happening. It's up to us to try to unify that group, bring it all together, and actually work towards a common cause. And if the personalities are the thing that's getting in the way, then you have to find methods of eliminating those personalities out of the equation. You still need them there, but they don't need to be piling on top of you, right? And that can be done in a lot of different ways. You can set up a single person or a group of people that handle disputes and complaints in a calm and level-headed way. You can have conflict mediators and a system set up so that people can actually deal with disputes with one another without having it actually boil over and turn into a thing where everything needs to dissolve. There are a lot of different methods and a lot of different ways that we can work together to actually achieve the goals that we wish to seek. So I hope that this helps at least a little bit to some of you that are out there starting your own groups and getting out there and organizing with other people. And if it has, I'm super duper happy about that, because I know a lot of people out there recently have really been getting involved in their communities. And I am so thankful to every one of you. Oh, it brings a tear to my eye every time I get a comment saying, hey, I just got involved in SRA, or I just started my own org, or I just became part of a Food Not Bombs and we're feeding homeless people, or whatever it is. I love seeing those comments. It's heartwarming and it's reassuring, because it makes me know that we're actually out there doing something and not just LARPing online. So keep up the good work, ladies, gentlemen, and non-binary people. And let's keep this shit up. 2021's just starting. We got a long year ahead of us. Let's fucking go! All right, anyway, that's my show. My name is Aaron. If you do get a chance, check out the links in the description box below. Hit the little bell button. You ain't gonna know when I release a new video, because they are not gonna tell you unless you hit that little bell. And make sure you're subscribed, because they're unsubscribing people every single day. Thank you very much for watching. Have a nice day.